You borrow money, the harvest fails. You can't pay it back. Today that means a bad credit score, some angry phone calls, maybe at worst bankruptcy. But for most of history, an unpaid debt could take something far more terrible. Not your house, not your things, you, your own body, your labor, sometimes your children, handed over until the debt was paid. This is the story of how a simple loan became one of the oldest roads into slavery, and how ancient people again and again had to invent a desperate way back out. When you picture the first slaves, you probably picture war. Captives taken by force, marched away, and that was real. But there was another source, quieter and far more common. It didn't arrive with an army, it arrived as a number written on a list. Remember how debt worked among your ancestors? In a small community where everyone knew everyone, debt was soft. You could pay it back in food, or in help, or in time. And if you fell on hard times, it could simply be forgiven. Nobody was seized. Nobody became property. A debt was a relationship, not a cage. So what changed? 3 inventions turned that soft debt into something hard. The first was writing. Once a debt could be recorded, it could no longer be quietly forgotten. It sat there, exact and unforgiving. The second was money. It turned a vague obligation into a precise number, a number that could grow with interest while you slept. And the third was the state. Because a written number only becomes a chain if someone powerful will enforce it. Now debt was hard, it could grow, and it could be collected. So picture a small farmer thousands of years ago. One bad season, and the grain runs out before the next harvest. So he borrows to survive the year. But the next harvest is thin too. Now he owes the loan plus interest. The debt is bigger than it was, and he is poorer than he was. He sells what little he has. It isn't enough. And eventually he runs out of everything he owns to give. Everything except one thing, himself. His own labor is the last asset he has left. So he pledges it. He works the creditor's land to pay down what he owes. And if that isn't enough, his family's labor too. Historians call this debt bondage. A free person slowly turned into a kind of property by a number that outgrew them. And this wasn't some rare abuse hiding in the shadows. It was written openly into the oldest laws we have. The Code of Hammurabi in Babylon, nearly 4,000 years ago, spells it out. A man could hand over his wife, his children, or himself to pay a debt. It's stated as plainly as a rule about property because that is what a person had become. But look closer and you find something surprising in that same law. It puts a limit on it. The debt slave was to be released after a set time, often just 3 years. Even the people who wrote these brutal laws understood the system was dangerous. They were already trying to put a brake on it. It's important to slow down here and see who this actually was. This wasn't a stranger from a distant land. This was a neighbor. Someone who had been free and part of the community the season before. A farmer who had simply been unlucky with the rain. Debt could split a family apart. It could turn the person next door into your master. And none of it required a single act of war. Just a loan, a bad year, and a number that would not stop growing. But here's what makes this more than a private tragedy. When it happens to enough people, it threatens the whole society. Imagine a kingdom where more and more farmers fall into bondage. The free population shrinks. There are fewer people to farm their land, to pay taxes, to serve as soldiers. Land and wealth pile up in the hands of a few large creditors. And a growing mass of people have nothing left to lose. A society that lets debt run wild slowly hollows itself out from the inside. The rulers could see it happening, and it frightened them. So they did something that sounds almost unthinkable to modern ears. Every so often, a ruler would simply cancel the debts, all of them, wiped clean. The tablets recording who owed what were smashed. People held in bondage were sent home. Land was returned. In ancient Sumer, there was a word for this: amargi. It's often translated as freedom, but its literal meaning is more beautiful. Something like a return to mother, a return to how things were before the debt swallowed you. And this idea appears again and again across the ancient world. In Athens, a leader named Solon came to power in a debt crisis. Citizens were being seized over what they owed. So he wiped out the debts and banned enslaving citizens over them. The Greeks called it the shaking off of burdens. In the Hebrew tradition, there was the Jubilee. Every 50 years, debts were forgiven, and those in bondage set free. Different peoples, different centuries, reaching for the same desperate remedy, because they had all learned the same lesson. A society cannot survive if it values a number more than its own people. And you are still standing in the middle of that ancient argument. We still can't decide what a debt really is. Is it a sacred promise that must always be paid no matter the cost? Or is it just an agreement one we can loosen when it starts to crush people? It's the question behind bankruptcy, which lets a person start again. It's behind the fights over student debt and medical debt. It's behind rich nations forgiving the debts of poor ones. Every one of those is a modern echo of amargi, the same ancient choice, in a new costume. So come back to that failed harvest and the loan you couldn't repay. For most of history, that moment stood at the edge of a cliff. On one side, you kept your freedom. On the other, you became something a number could own. Your ancestors learned in the hardest way imaginable a simple and radical truth. A human being is worth more than a debt. Every society that forgot it eventually tore itself apart. And everyone that survived had to find the courage, now and then, to break the tablets. To decide that some promises are less important than the people trapped inside them. And to let them go.